What does the United States want in Venezuela? Every time the United States looks south, the world holds its breath. It's not new that every American move in Latin America is surrounded by noble rhetoric: freedom, democracy, security, but almost always conceals much deeper interests. The question no one answers honestly is, what does the United States really want in Venezuela? Because when an empire moves its pieces, it's rarely out of altruism, it's for control. While the White House talks about fighting drug trafficking and defending peace, behind the scenes, something quite different is revealed: covert operations, economic sanctions, and a veiled struggle for oil and global influence. It's the kind of story that's been repeated for decades. The president changes, the enemy changes, but the script remains the same. Interestingly, this time, Trump didn't try to hide his intentions. He laid it bare, and this, in itself, speaks volumes about the new way of waging war in the 21st century. Invisible wars, fought not with bombs, but with narratives, espionage, and economic power. What's at stake is not just the fate of one country, but the balance of an entire continent. Venezuela is a mirror of a changing world, where sovereignty is confused with survival, and humanitarian aid becomes the new guise of domination. Understanding what the United States truly seeks there is understanding what the future holds for all of South America. So take advantage now, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here we talk about what few have the courage to expose: the behind-the-scenes power that shapes the world you live in. The origin of tensions between the United States and Venezuela. Since the beginning of the 21st century, relations between the United States and Venezuela have become a veritable diplomatic roller coaster. Oil, which could have been a symbol of cooperation, ended up becoming the trigger for a power and influence struggle. Washington watched with suspicion the advancement of Hugo Chávez's Bolivarian project, while Caracas saw American sanctions and threats as a blow to its sovereignty. It was the beginning of a modern Cold War, fought not by missiles, but by narratives, oil, and regional control. When Chávez adopted an anti-American rhetoric, it wasn't just an ideological issue, it was a strategic move. By nationalizing oil and expelling foreign companies, he hurt billionaire interests, which raised alarm bells in Washington. From then on, the U.S. began reshaping its foreign policy in Latin America, using the old defense of democracy argument as a shield to protect its own economic interests. After all, how many times in history has this rhetoric served as a mask for actions of geopolitical dominance? While the Venezuelan people faced internal crises, the global landscape began to shift silently. The presence of China and Russia in the country brought even more tension, making Venezuela not just a regional problem, but a valuable player in a global power struggle. And that's precisely where the new era of covert operations enters the scene, with a name that, once again, steals the spotlight: Donald Trump. The political and economic motivations behind American action. Behind every diplomatic rhetoric, there's always a game of interests. And in the case of the United States, Venezuela represents much more than a troubled neighbor. It's a strategic opportunity. The country possesses one of the world's largest oil reserves, and controlling this source guarantees energy power and global influence. When Trump talks about fighting drug trafficking or protecting democracy, what he's really protecting are the economic pillars that sustain the American empire. Venezuelan oil is like a rare jewel on a board full of hungry miners. The difference is that, in this game, the tools aren't shovels, but economic sanctions, diplomatic sabotage, and covert operations. The blockade imposed by Washington isn't just punishment, it's pressure. The idea is to suffocate the regime until it implodes, allowing the entry of new partnerships more favorable to U.S. interests. It's an old power tactic disguised under a moral veneer. Trump knew that the Latin enemy narrative could bolster his domestic image. In a divided country, he needed an external villain to unite the masses. and Venezuela, mired in chaos and scandal, perfectly served this purpose. Thus every sanction, every CIA operation, every explosive statement was part of a larger strategy, an attempt to reassert American supremacy in times of growing multipolarity. But this move came at a price, and soon the world would witness the next chapter, the return of the ghosts of the Cold War. The role of Trump and the CIA in this new chapter. When Donald Trump publicly confirmed authorization for CIA operations inside Venezuela, it wasn't just an act of foreign policy. It was a calculated power move. The message was clear. The United States would once again act as a protagonist on the continent. For many, it seemed like a return to the Reagan era of the 1980s, when American intelligence operated in the shadows to shape governments according to its interests. The difference is that now, in the digital age, the war is also waged through narrative and information manipulation. Trump understood something few leaders do. Public perception is a weapon as powerful as any missile. By exposing part of the CIA's operations, he sought not only to intimidate Caracas, but also to create a psychological effect on the world, to show that the U.S. still dictates the rules of the game. It's like a chess player who purposefully reveals one piece to distract the opponent while preparing for checkmate from another flank. In this case, the flank was international opinion and the reinforcement of American nationalism. Behind the justification of fighting trafficking and national security lay a narrative constructed with surgical precision. Geopolitical experts point out that the real objective was to undermine Russian and Chinese influence in the country, keeping the Western Hemisphere under Washington's thumb. It was the old Monroe Doctrine motto, "America for Americans," resurfacing under a new guise. And while the world debated the morality of these actions, few realized what was truly at stake: the repositioning of the United States as an undisputed power in Latin America's backyard. The geopolitical consequences for South America. The American move in Venezuela was like throwing a stone into a calm lake. The ripples spread throughout South America. Every country felt the impact directly or indirectly. In Colombia, American military support increased. In Brazil, diplomatic pressure to side with Washington grew. And in Cuba, fear of a new interventionist policy rekindled memories of the Cold War. The political map of the continent began to slowly reshape itself, guided not by the will of the people, but by the interests of the powers. This new tension brought back an old dilemma. To what extent is Latin America master of its own destiny? Historically, the United States has always viewed the South as an extension of its natural influence, a territory to be administered, not negotiated. With every covert operation, with every sanction, the message was repeated: the house remains under our watch. And meanwhile, countries in the region were divided between resistance or alignment, fearing the economic and political consequences of challenging the giant to the north. But there's one detail that changes everything. Today's world is no longer the same. China's presence, agreements with Russia, and the growing autonomy of regional blocs like Mercosur are creating a new balance of power. South America is no longer an easy game to control. What once was obedience is now resistance. And this silent resistance may be precisely what the United States fears most: the birth of a new order in which power is no longer unilateral, but shared. What does the United States want in Venezuela? Now that you understand what's behind American operations, tell me, is the rhetoric of freedom still convincing? Or have we learned to see what's hidden behind it? How many times will the world have to watch the same script before realizing that modern warfare isn't about bombs, but about manipulation and control? The truth is that power no longer resides solely in weapons. It resides in information, and those who master it govern. But what about you? Which side are you on this global chessboard? The side of those who simply consume what they tell you, or the side of those who seek to understand what no one explains? The answers to these questions say a lot about the future. Not just Venezuela's, but all of ours. Because when an empire decides to intervene, the first victim is rarely a country. That's the truth. So if you want to continue understanding what really happens behind the speeches, like this video, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell here. Each new piece of content will show you what the mainstream newspapers don't. What's hidden between the lines of power. And remember, questioning is the first step to seeing the world as it really is.